Hi, this is Steve Hargadon, and welcome to the Future of Education. It's Thursday, the 22nd of March, 2012, and our special guest is David Warlick. David, thanks so much for being here. The Future of Education is a Web 2.0 Labs project, a set of projects around helping conversations take place for learners and teachers. Also, we appreciate support from Blackboard Collaborate for the use of this room. Coming up at ISTE, we're going to talk about this tonight, but ISTE Unplugged, a whole set of crowdsourced activities around the ISTE conference. Really hope you'll consider joining us. Starts with what used to be called EduBloggerCon, and it's now Social EdCon, the Saturday before ISTE. An all-day unconference. You don't even need to be registered at ISTE to come. So if you're in San Diego or planning to come to San Diego for ISTE, we hope that you'll join us. And then lots and lots of other activities, including a new 3-hour unconference on Sunday on global education for those who are actively participating in globally connecting students, and the Bloggers Cafe, and lots more. Lots of fun. Go to isteunplugged.com to keep up with all that's taking place. Oh, and by the way, if you haven't presented at ISTE before and you would like to, we do have ISTE Live where you can present. We'll have a presentation area, we'll have a live stream, and we want to help you become a part of that conversation. Classroom 2.0 celebrates its 5th anniversary this year. This is very exciting. We have 2 projects related to this. One is called Ed Incubator. PBS NewsHour is our first user of that service. It's to help provide authentic teacher counsels for valued educational projects. As well, we are soliciting contributions for Classroom 2.0, the book. The deadline for that is April 21st. Everything will get published online. We're so excited about this. If you haven't thought about submitting a chapter yet, we hope that you will do so. We have some really fun worldwide conferences coming up. The Social Learning Summit is on the 21st of April. It's all day Saturday. Again, we are open now for the call for proposals is open. These are half-hour sessions. They're going to be on Saturday. This is sponsored by Discovery Education. It's their spring event, but it is open to the whole community, and we hope that you will consider both participating and possibly presenting. We'd love to have that. So go to sociallearningsummit.com or just go to Classroom 2.0 and look for the logo. Future of Libraries Conference is October 3rd through 5th. So much fun, generating so much excitement. The Global Education Conference will now be in its 3rd year. If you haven't done this, it's 5 days of sheer joy, online, virtual, and free. And then we are waiting to set dates for a Gaming and Education Conference and an Alternative Education Conference, both of which are in the works. Coming up on the Future of Education on the 27th, which is next week, Alec Koros is going to talk to us about social learning, which should be a lot of fun. And then Dick Gale talks to us about appreciative inquiry and positive deviance, part of a California project. Both appreciative inquiry and positive deviance have huge resonance with me. I can't wait to talk about their use in education. Howard Rheingold on his new book, Net Smart, on April 3rd. April 5th, Joseph Grenny of the fairly famous books, Crucial Conversations, Change Anything, is going to come talk about change, specifically education. Jennifer Fox, To Heck with Traditional Content, Mark Tucker, lots of fun, including John Hunter with the World Peace Game, another 4th grade achievements. That's going to be on April 18th at an early time. Anyway, there's lots on there. Hopefully there's something that will be of worth to you. If you've missed any of the shows, they are all recorded in full Illuminate Collaborate versions and an MP3. We heard from Kathy Davidson earlier this week on her new book, Now You See It. That was a lot of fun. Mimi Ito last week. Both of those conversations were terrific. We had a Stop Stealing Dreams panel, which is the Stop Stealing Dreams of the Seth Godin freely released book. Well, you can see there over 250 shows, all recorded, available for your listening pleasure. Now we're going to give you the chance to indicate where you're participating from. To the left of the whiteboard, you should see, to the left of the map, you should see some icons. You're looking for the star icon, the second one down. You have to click on that twice, and then you can click on the map. It's also fun if you shout out in the chat where you're participating from, time, temperature. I always know Bill Allred's in the audience. Couple in Australia, delightful. I'm in Park City, Utah, where we had desperately needed snow this weekend, and now it's 60 degrees. What a weird year. So oh, look at that, Rio de Janeiro. Love it. Lily girl to the bay. I always love a Brazilian visitor since I lived in Brazil for a year when I was in high school. And I get to practice my rusty Portuguese. Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks for those of you who are listening to the recording. We sure appreciate your participation. David, this is really delightful for me. I'm really glad to have you on. We're calling this a conversation, but I've got lots of topics I want to kind of drill down with you on. How are things going?
Things are going fine. By the way, I don't like any of those pictures.
They were up on your website.
I know, but I don't have to like them. The one on the far left is one that my wife calls my Time magazine picture, which is a little uncomfortable.
Well, I think they capture you well.
I'm doing fine. I was in Washington first part of the week for the Discovery Education Beyond the Textbook Forum, and you're right, it's been a weird winter. I came home and we had dogwoods and azaleas blooming. Everything's about a month early right now, which is kind of strange. Although I'm not complaining. You can't complain about the flowers. I'm forgetting about this talk button here.
Oh, I'm getting a little bit of audio lag, and again, I've had some problems today, so I apologize if I go in and out, but I think we'll be okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about that lag. So, David, I wanted to kind of start with the, and we will get to the textbooks, but I wanted to start with the factory model narrative. It feels to me that in the last 5 years, it's gone from being something that we've had to kind of shift our thinking around and talk about, maybe not entirely to receptive audiences, to being kind of now the baseline understanding of a difficulty in translating the skills that are being taught in schools to what the job market or the current world would like. As you speak to audiences, are you still using that narrative, or how do you find that people are describing the shift?
I still use the narrative, but what I'm getting now, I mean, just very, very briefly, but what I'm getting now is more, chuckles than just nods of the head. So it's part of the conversation that I think is going on out there right now, and it's very exciting after all of these years. And I've been in education for 36 years now, and I've been involved in technology education for, I guess, 30 of those years, maybe a little more than that. The last, I guess, couple of years, maybe 3 years, have been exciting because I think people are beginning to have the right conversations. Now, of course, the money has been scarce, but regardless of that, there's an awful lot of excitement, and there seems to be an awful lot of investment in the technology that I think is going to be required to make these changes.
Well, so this is going to be an interesting conversation because I'm actually worried a little that we've gone through a period of time where we were in kind of a bubble. That the discussions around educational technology were very invigorating and very exciting and almost kind of revolutionary, and that some of what we're seeing now with both the venture capital money, the Gates Foundation and MacArthur, is that large amounts of money feel to me as though they're potentially skewing the conversation back toward innovation, but innovation within the structure of high-stakes testing. Are you seeing that at all? Would you agree or disagree?
Well, I haven't been part of the conversations that you're talking about, or the conferences that you have been attending. But from what I'm reading from you and from others, and a lot of what I see coming across, it points in that direction. That there is a lot of interest in investing in education, and it is getting beyond the factory mechanized teaching and learning, but it's still very, and I really enjoyed the way that you put it in your recent blog entry entitled "The Tale of two ed tech agendas. It's very effective, I think, to characterize what you're hearing at these conferences as being part of the head of the long tail, and what we really, what many of us are talking about is actually in the tail of the long tail. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that model, it was the term was coined by Chris Anderson, who I believe is editor-in-chief of Wired magazine, and basically it is a way of measuring an economic behavior where you count up products, let's say, and in the case of education, media, information, you count up the number of movies that have been rented, the number of books that have been sold from Amazon.com, the number of music, the amount of music that has been sold online or in print, and what you get is the products that sell a whole lot of copies. That line skews. I wish I had the skill that I could actually draw this. Let me see if I can. I don't know how to pull out the whiteboard.
No, I'll go ahead and put up my blog post, and it does have a picture in it.
Yeah, do that. Okay, so you put a link into that. Anyway, at the right, where you see the curve skewed way up, that represents books and music and movies and other products that have sold a whole lot of copies. So those are your hits, your blockbusters, your bestsellers. What happens when you then factor in books and music and movies and content and blogs and whatever that aren't widely read, or at least widely read as a hit or a blockbuster does, that skews down to the bottom. What is good? What is interesting is that curve, where it curves out to the right, what Chris Anderson calls the long tail, didn't exist 10 years ago. Because these are books and music and movies and blogs and all kinds of information that wasn't available because there was no way to market it. There was no way to get it out to people who were interested in reading it. Now with Amazon.com and the internet in general, there's this new digital bazaar where people can present their information, even market their information to a much wider audience. Now it's still not very widely read, but it is read by people who care about that particular topic. So what you have in the far left there, your hits, your blockbusters, your more corporate view of educational solutions. These are things that are. Let's see, how did you describe it? It's very vertical. It's all about volume. It's all about scaling. It's about where success is measured in being able to produce a lot of the same sort of thing. It's based on hierarchy and control. And whereas when you get out to the curve, you get out to the long tail, it's much more horizontal. It's more about breadth and depth and specialty. It's about specialization. It's about three of the books that I've written are self-published, and there's not nearly enough people who would be interested in reading any of my books that would be worthwhile for me to publish them in a traditional way. However, enough people were interested in reading my first book that I made enough money to send my daughter to college. And many of you know that that's nothing to sneeze at. I couldn't make a living at doing this, but it is a place where we can specialize, and if we get back into education, it's a place where we can differentiate, and it's a place that our students take for granted. Where they can go and listen to the music that they want to listen to, they can make the friends they want to make, they can flourish in a world of specialization as opposed to becoming compliant in a world of sameness.
I really appreciate you describing that, David. I think what's interesting to me is it feels as though the head of the tail, or the head of the demand curve, will often take the language of the tail or the reform movement and use it, but it doesn't feel as though it's the same. As you think about self-learning and students and kind of the ways in which we might rethink learning within schools, do you feel like they were at a point of actually needing to clarify what those actually mean so that they don't get co-opted by the larger kind of vertical hierarchical control narratives?
Well, I'm trying. I emailed to you the other day saying that there was something that I walked away from the beyond the textbooks forum that would probably raise some eyebrows, and I blogged about it I think yesterday, and that is that I'm not ready to unwelcome the corporate world yet. I'm not ready. I've been in education long enough to know, I think, or to feel that I can be surprised. There is a type of education, a type of learning, a type of teaching, an approach to the types of experiences that our students, I believe, need to be having that needs to happen, and if a textbook industry is able to provide this, then I think that's fine. I don't really care who does it, and I don't care that they're making a living doing it, because we're all making a living doing what we're doing. The problem is that that in some instances that we could name, these industries, these corporations become so wealthy that the system has been skewed in their direction, and this is one of the realizations that I discovered at the meeting, where Discovery Education explained that if they wanted to create a sustainable business in supporting education with their content, they needed to go where the money was, and the money is in textbooks. Textbooks have traditionally, in most cases, been a dependable source of money for those who serve education. So they are forced, in a sense, to shape their product as a textbook. And this is the problem, I think, where due to legislation, due to the past success of large corporations, there is a tendency to keep things the way that they are. I know that I've kind of gotten away from your original question, but I came away with a sense from them, and they assured us that others in the textbook industry do realize that they need to do things differently, and that they're actually trying to accomplish this. And if they do, I think that that's fine. I suspect it is probably more likely going to come out of the general education community, an open source project or something like that. But I think it could come from. I just want it to come.
So this is a hard question, and I think it's kind of the reform versus revolution question. It's hard for me not to look at sort of the current Wall Street situation and see a parallel here, which is, can an industry actually reform itself when the financial incentives are so high? And I'm kind of wondering, do we really need textbooks? I mean, we have tools now for the aggregation of web content. Make an argument that the textbook plays an important role in education aside from funding companies.
Well, I think that the money is still important, and I think that in going around and saying that we don't need textbooks is saying to some politicians, we don't need that money. And it becomes an opportunity for them to say, well, here, we can do education a lot more cheaply and take the money away. I mean, in looking at Discovery Education's product, they did a very, very brief demonstration, but a lot of the focus of their demonstration was on how their materials can be easily printed out and handed out on paper to their students, because the assumption is still that most classrooms, most students do not have the technology that they need in order to interact with the types of textbooks. And I just did the little quote symbol there, of textbooks that we would like for them to be using, that the textbook industry would like for them to be using. Somebody made the point that whatever comes out, it needs to be platform agnostic, and I agree with that. But the point was made that look, we don't have money for textbooks. We got kids coming in with smartphones. It needs to be able to work on a smartphone, and I understand that sentiment. But at the same time, do we use a smartphone as the common denominator of what can be offered? My point is that we still need to invest in the technology infrastructure that's going to be necessary to support whatever we see coming out, whether it be some sort of a platform that is created and marketed by textbook industry or out of the open source, or just people just hobbling together technically the things that they need for their classrooms, which is certainly a possibility.
This is a conversation that could go on forever, but it's a fascinating one, and you've raised some issues that I didn't think about. It feels like a true dilemma. If the narrative that we don't need textbooks, that we can aggregate content on the web as effectively, means there'll be a reduction in financing, that's awkwardly balanced against the fact that when that financing comes through, it often goes towards the very things that some of us would say are counter to the dramatic historical shift in teaching and learning that potentially could take place. Let's move on, and we can come back in the Q&A if you want to. Tell me about personal learning networks. You've talked about them within the context of kind of a gardening analogy. Has the story on personal learning networks changed with the volume of people contributing content? And how do you see curation and the building of learning networks now?
Wasn't really prepared for that one. In general, I haven't seen it change in what's going on. I've seen it expressed in a number of ways and mixed in inappropriately with professional learning communities and things like that, although I see the two working together. But what has been exciting to me over the last couple of years now is how it has become so mobile. Used to be when I was doing my learning, my personal learning, I was sitting in an ergonomic chair at my desk, and I had to be sitting at my laptop at my desk to be doing that. Now with the iPad and the iPhone, I can pull it out at the airport, the train station, out in the backyard, and I can catch up on reading that people have shared with me. It's not quite as technical now. It used to be we had to subscribe to specific blogs and Twitter feeds and things like that. It all seems to happen automatically in a sense through what's one that I use most often, Flipboard, it has become a much more integral part of how I live today, and I would make a special point of that it's not something that I'm doing professionally. It's not something that I'm doing just for my job. It's part of my lifestyle. And because it has become so mobile, it has become an integral and really indistinguishable part of how I live my daily life. And I think it's really a cornerstone of what we need to be aiming toward with our students. What our kids have learned or what they do learn is very, very important, but it's not as important as it used to be. What they're learning changes. The answers in some cases, the answers on the test change from year to year because we live in a time of rapid change, and that it has what has become much more important is that they are learning to teach themselves. That they are not just learning the skills for lifelong learning, but that they are developing the habits of a learning lifestyle.
5 years ago for that first ISTE EduBloggerCon, it felt like you could pretty much keep track of most of the conversation, but now there's so much going on that you could post something and I would never know it. How has that changed your own practice in terms of your own personal learning network?
Well, what I find myself following is not individual bloggers. I mean, what impacts me more is retweets. What impacts me more is not just what you are writing, but what you are reading. As you encounter something that interests you, that you think is important, and you retweet it out, I get not only your blog, but I'm getting the blogs that you read. And of course, we could do that technically before, but it has become a part of what streams through my iPad every day. And I just, I stick my straw in every chance that I can and take advantage of it. And again, more times than not, I'm not actually reading the person who tweeted. I'm reading what that person was impressed with that they read. So it's a real hodgepodge of ideas.
I'm still getting a little bit of audio lag, and I apologize for stepping on your toes there. Are we learning something about social learning through personal learning networks? Are we in a place now where we're beginning to rethink how students learn by virtue of how teachers have been learning through the blogosphere?
I could not talk about that authoritatively, because I know that there are researchers out there who are actually studying that. So I would hesitate to share an opinion. What I would say is that we are learning to develop those habits. We are as educators who are engaged in this, we are learning to cultivate our own habits of learning, and we are sharing those habits with each other. So the science of network learning, I can't really say much about, but just just the practice and the thrill of having so much information coming in. My experience in education technology has been very much a set of stairs, where there was a point when I first got involved in computers, you had to program the computers. I learned how to program in BASIC, and suddenly I was plunged up to a whole new level of possibilities, of opportunities, things that I could do to serve my students. But then it kind of leveled out. I just got better and better at it, and then something else came along, and I got plunged up. Because of the nature of information, because I had to buy books to learn this sort of thing, it was very jagged. Level out and then plunge up, level out and then plunge up. Since we have started being able to share and connect ideas and writings with each other, it's very much become a constant incline of learning something new every day, and knowing that that any day I could get up and learn something that is just going to completely revolutionize my thinking about how I serve education. I'm kind of approaching one of those right now, and I don't know if it's actually happening or it just feels like it. But like a lot of us, I had some reservations about the iPad when it first came out, and it's a consumption tool, blah blah blah. But and I have some reservations about iBooks too. When they came out, but I went ahead and took the time. Being self-published, I can take my text from my books and dump them anywhere I want to. I downloaded the iBooks author, and have started playing around with that, and have been quite amazed with some of the possibilities of what you can do. I mean, in the advertising, they're not showing you a lot of what, if you know how to do a little coding, of what you can actually, the kinds of experiences you can actually create with these iBooks. And I think this is sort of a linchpin of this new information platform environment, education platform environment, is that it is a place or a product whose value is not in what it is when it's launched, but it's in what it can become. And the iPad is a perfect example of this. The iPad is launched as this consumption tool, but the real excitement of the iPad to me is what it has become as a result of creative app developers. And I think that the education environment needs to be very much the same way. It needs to be a platform within which creative, clever educators can continually reinvent new ways of using this platform. That it's not a proprietary standards driven box that you have to buy and then play just inside that box, but that it's actually a set of building blocks that can be put together in an infinite number of ways by creative educators and by creative students. And I feel like, you know, with the iBooks author, and again, I just started with it, but it's really causing me to rethink what a digital book might be and how it might be marketed or how it might be distributed, the shape that it might take, that a book might come to look a little bit more like an app than a book.
Well, I always try and make sure that people know that you are actually the originator of the EduBloggerCon and Bloggers Cafe ideas, which have been so much fun over the last 5 years. But part of what I think we've seen in those events is, and especially in the use of social media amongst educators and personal learning networks, is we've seen the opportunity for, or the potential for teachers to reshape the profession through horizontal conversations. Do you think that that's going to happen? Is there, are the conversations gaining in depth and weight enough that teachers will have more of a voice in the larger narratives around education, or is it just going? Is that an optimistic view?
Well, I think it has certainly increased, and it is exciting. I can't remember if it was the first ISTE that had the EduBloggerCon or the one right afterwards, but there was a dramatic change in my view in the nature of the conference, in that there was as much learning going on outside of the conference halls and the presentation rooms as there was inside, because of this open communication and all of these venues in the halls where you could go and you could talk to people. It's almost like you couldn't turn around without learning something. And I think that this is part of what we need to be pushing for in schools, is a culture of learning, and you know, that's a term that's been used a lot, but I think that in a lot of cases when they say we want our school to be a culture of learning, we're thinking, you know, a school where the kids are learning and they're learning really well. But it needs to be a culture where you're not just respecting the learning that the kids are doing, but you're respecting the learning that the teachers are doing, and the learning that the librarian is doing, the learning that the principal is doing, and that this is part of a huge conversation around, you know, what I have just learned and how that has made me a bigger person than I was before. There's certainly pockets where that's going to be difficult to achieve. There are schools that are going to be very difficult to reach with this conversation. But you know, I keep thinking back to, sorry, I keep talking about Apple, but you know, what they did with the iPhone and with the iPad and others is that they created a product that we didn't know we couldn't live without. You know, and that's in a sense what they were after, is, you know, we want to sell something that people didn't know that they couldn't live without. And I think that's what we need in education, is a platform, whatever you want to call it, but some sort of an environment within which you are compelled to go in and start carrying on these conversations and building these learning products and crafting learning experiences for our students that are just, you know, so compelling that they, you know, school turns into play and play turns into school. Learning and play, you know, become very much the same thing.
So that's where I feel like we have this kind of cognitive dissonance, or we have some competing narratives, that when the technology enables relationships and the kind of core interpersonal practices that lead to learning, then it's very easy to feel confident about the technology. But it often feels like the technology can also be used in many ways to kind of depersonalize, especially in conversations around sort of data and dicing up the data in order to do a better job. And I always laugh when, you know, you hear about these massive online courses of, you know, 30,000 people where the promise is it will be the most engaging education, and that just doesn't make sense to me. Do you feel like I'm exaggerating if I say that it feels like we have those two different capabilities or potentials in the technology, and that we have to be really careful about distinguishing between the two?
Absolutely. I think that the whole issue about data is an excellent example, and from the perspective of many of the people who are investing in reforming education, this is a natural direction for them to want to go in. That the computers are very good at measuring, computers are very good at visualizing, and that if we can better control the learning environment with data, then we can better teach our children. We can better educate our children. The sadness, in my opinion, is that I love data, and I think that data ought to be part of literacy. That this is something that kids ought to be learning to do. That they ought to be part of the analyzing of data of their own performance, but also of the world around them, and learning how to use this data to tell stories, to draw conclusions. But to answer your question, I think you're absolutely right. I think that there's a real tendency, and perhaps a seductive tendency, to use technology in these ways, and it is in my opinion, it is a complete and total waste.
For you, if you think about the long-term ultimate goal of kind of rethinking education at this moment of historical change, how much of your vision is driven by the idea of student-driven learning, or what kind of compelling core issue really drives you, where you hope that in 10 years we'll see the bigger picture?
The other day, I read a blog post before the Beyond the Textbook forum, where I used the Google Forms, and I asked people to post a simile for the textbook. That the textbook ought to be like this, like that, and some of them that came through were, it should be like a quest, it should be like a production studio, it should be like an extension of the brain. But I got to thinking, when I was thinking this morning about this conversation, that if I turn this around, these are the sorts of things that our students want to do. They want to take a quest. They want a production studio. They want to extend their brains. One of the suggestions was a reality game. They want to play reality. They want to play with the information that defines their world, and do things with it and explore it by playing with those numbers or that information or those connections. They want to playlist knowledge. They want empowerment. They want magic. And we live in a world today where we can do magic with information. And I think one of the realizations that I think could fairly easily be made by most everybody is that when we are after school is over, after we've graduated, after we've entered the workplace, our lifestyles, our families, and so on, much of the learning that we do in order to do our jobs is done in these ways. It's done on quests. It's done by having the tools to produce with. It's done by having tools to extend our brains and extend our hands. It's done by playing with reality. It's done by giving ourselves permission to make mistakes. I mean, this is the kinds of learning experiences that we've all been talking about are very similar to the learning experiences that we take for granted as professionals, as adults. We all continue to learn. We all continue to learn in exciting ways, and we learn by play. If you enjoy your job especially, you learn by play. And why not have these same types of learning experiences for our students in the classroom, especially when the last thing that we need them to do is be leaving school hating learning, leaving school thinking, I don't want to ever have to sit in a classroom again. I don't want to have to go through that again. That's the most horrible thing that I could see happening, because we desperately need for them to be learning the rest of their lives.
Do we spend too much time trying to justify learning as resulting in practical job skills, do we need to be talking more about the value of learning for intellectual independence and perspective and kind of personal satisfaction?
Yes, but I mean, yes, of course. Learning is, part of being human. Learning is growing. My wish when I was teaching the classroom was that my students are leaving larger than they came in, and I don't mean that they've put on weight and gotten taller, but that they think of themselves as more person because of what they've learned. But I don't want to de-emphasize the job skills because I think that is important and that is critical. The problem is we don't know what those job skills are. For the first time in history, we're preparing our students for a workplace and a lifestyle for a future that we can't clearly describe. And that we think that we know exactly what they need to be learning to be ready for their future is the height of arrogance, in my opinion. Just recently I read a statistic that the mobile app industry in the United States is employing 146,000 people. Now, this is an industry that didn't exist in 2007. This is just the last 5 years that this industry has been in existence, and it's already employing almost 500,000 people. And these are people who, by and large, did not learn to do what they're doing while they were in high school or even in college. These were people who knew how to teach themselves the skills that they needed for this new type of tool, this new type of audience, this new type of application, this new lifestyle, mobile app lifestyle. These were people who learned these sorts of things because they knew how to learn. We need to be making sure that all of our students are leaving school with the skills and the curiosity and the passion to keep on learning, and that learning is an adventure, not a job, but that learning is an adventure that makes you bigger every day. Work and play are just they're becoming the same in a way. I mean, and I can say that because I work out of my home. I walk into my office right out of the bedroom in the morning. It's fun. I enjoy it. When I want to go take a walk, I shut the lid on my laptop and I go out and take my cholesterol walk. For me in particular, work and play are very much the same thing. They blend together. Teaching and learning, I think, even in the classroom, needs to blend together. Teachers need to be doing more learning. Learners need to be doing more teaching. That they're very much rolled together in one. The other day, I went into Google Translation. I can't remember the exact details, but I took the word teach, and I may be getting this wrong, but I took the word teach and I translated it into Danish. And then you take that word and translate it from Danish back into English, and it translates as learn. They're very much the same thing. They roll together, and I think that teachers and learners need to be rolling those things together. It's fun.
So I like that vision, and I like your description of your work life. But I think for me, kind of the crux of the matter is there's an independence of thinking and of motivation that are required to do the kind of independent work you're doing, which is very different than the kind of skill set or compliance that's required to work in a large corporation. And it feels like that's kind of the hot spot, which is, are we ready to allow students the kind of independence that would prepare them for making independent choices to be an app developer or to be a David Warlick kind of sole proprietor, or even with all of the language we're using, are we still expecting that people will not be independent?
I agree that there is a sense among us in education that even though we're talking about 21st century skills and independence and creativity and that sort of thing, that there's an awful lot that's working against that. And there may be specific reasons for that. But that said, I don't think that that is absolutely pervasive. I've talked with a number of technology people in the technology industry, who complain that the programmers that they're hiring right out of university know their programming, they know their stuff really well, but they don't know how to creatively solve problems with what they know. They don't know how to use it. They learned the code. I mean, my son spent a year majoring in computer science. He absolutely hated it. Because they were teaching him programming the same way I was taught grammar. They were teaching syntax instead of teaching them how to do interesting things with computers. I love programming because I approach it as I would like for my computer to do this. I would like to be able to make this available to people who use my website. And so I go out and I find the code and figure out how to hack the code together in order to make this event happen or this service happen or whatever. And I love it. It's like playing with toys. It's like playing with Legos. But what they're getting is people who know the syntax, but not people who know how to creatively change the rules of that syntax in order to solve this particular problem. Another instance that I experienced not too long ago, I was at a luncheon, and I was sitting beside of a woman who was head of HR for some corporation. And we got to talking about where we were from. She had just recently moved to the Raleigh area, and I got to ask her some questions about workforce and what sorts of skills they were looking for. And she said, when I was interviewing for one of the jobs, she said the interviewer told me that the fact that I had only had 2 jobs prior to this time was a disadvantage. That what people are looking for, at least in the job she was looking at, what people were looking for were people who had already had 5 or 6 or 7 jobs, because they were people who were walking in with not just 2 ways of doing things, but with 5 or 6 or 7 ways of doing things. I think in some industries, they really are looking for and desperately need creative thinkers, independent thinkers, and people who are willing to move around and change environments and locations to experience new ways of solving problems. And there's certainly parts of the industry who want compliance. But I don't think that characterization is as pervasive as perhaps it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago.
All of us are kind of feeling the elephant here, and we don't really know. I think there is a little bit of cognitive dissonance, though, taking place, which is for all the talk of independence, most corporations still make it fairly clear that you're constrained in what you're allowed to blog about, or not saying anything that would disparage the company. And there's still very much a sense that, well, we want you to be creative, but we still will ask you for your Facebook password when you apply for the job.
Yep, I can't deny that.
Hey, this is really fun. We've only got about 8 minutes left, but if you had a question for David that didn't come up in the chat or that I didn't ask, this is a really good time to ask it. You can do so either by putting it in the chat again, or you can raise your hand and take the microphone. To raise your hand, it's the 3rd icon over in the participant window. It's a raised hand, and you just click on that, and I'm glad to give you the mic. David, a personal question about our own kind of group of those who met 5 years ago at a JBloggerCon. And it feels as though, if anything, that group is less collaborative than it was 5 years ago. Is that just a matter of busyness and that Web 2.0 narrative becoming the main narrative, or is there a larger lesson there in our interests and our desires and what then actually really takes place?
I can't say that we've become less collaborative. I think the most that I can say is that our messages have become shorter. Twitter has changed it, I think, dramatically. And so the nature of the conversation, I think, has changed and shifted. we're not playing with the collaboration the way that we did when these tools were brand new. But I still run across people who are, they want to collect some information, and they're creating a Google form or some other sort of voting application. They're hobbling it together in order to collect the information that they need to solve their problem. So I think that the nature of the collaboration has certainly changed, but I can't say that the amount has. It may have, but it just hasn't been my experience.
Well, I've actually wondered if, in part, people are busy doing their own things, but I also think that we kind of idealized levels of cooperation, and in a lot of cases, financial interests or concerns kind of shifted the ground on a lot of the work that people were doing. And so Tony has a question. So Tony, I'm going to give you the mic. And I'm sorry, my audio is delayed, so I have no idea when it's coming through. But you now, Tony, have mic capability. You can click on the talk button to ask a question.
Found it. Just a quick question back towards attribution. This might be a bit of a step away from the conversation that you've been having, so feel free to just give me a quick answer if you feel. It's talking about attribution coming traditionally from books and journals and so forth. But now we have all sorts of different other techniques for attribution, things like the like button for Facebook, +1 in Google, those sorts of things. Do you see that these two systems can merge and merge synchronously?
I think that they can. One of the conversations that came out of the conference in Washington this week was about attribution and about authority. And I think one of the shifts that I would see happening is that that attribution is less about the source being authoritative, although that certainly doesn't go away, but it's less about that, and it's more about the defensibility of it. It's not, did you get that from an authoritative source, journal, whatever, but why is that right? Why is that true? What is the evidence that you can present that the answer that you've given or the solution that you provided or the products that you put together is accurate or appropriate or whatever? That I think that ought to be a major part of the daily conversation that we're having in the classroom is not you got that right or you got that wrong, but defend your answer. Tell me why you think your answer is correct, and that way that puts the responsibility on the learner to, as they are learning, as they're building, as they're looking for solutions, it puts the responsibility on them to, at the same time, collect the evidence or look for the evidence that it is true. And it may be a citation or it may be logic. This is one of the things that I've often suggested that we need to go back and do is teach rhetoric. Teach the art of argument, because sometimes there is no citation, sometimes there is no authoritative badge that this is true because this person said it, that it is true because of these reasons of logic that is true. So the scholarliness of attribution, I think, is still there and critically important. But I think what has become more important than it used to be is our students being able and in the habit of defending their answers.
David, you have a question from Carol, who asks, in your opinion, then, how important is the need for personal networking for teachers to build wider awareness of the future of education?
Well, I don't know what. the reason I hesitate with that is I don't know what the future of education is. I mean, I don't think any of us do. I mean, we haven't seen that product come out yet that we didn't know we couldn't live without. That's going to change. That's going to change everything. But I think that if teachers if teachers want to be a part of that future, then they have to be a part of the conversation about that future. And I think that needs to be part of what it is to be a teacher, is being part of that conversation and being a master learner. It's the best answer I can give for that.
Will we see the future of education and schooling diverge from the future of personal learning?
Diverge? You mean break apart? I think that...
the question is, will the two go separate directions?
I don't think so. I think they need to come together. Again, I think that our students need to be leaving their school, graduating, whatever, embedded in a learning lifestyle. We need to make sure that they not only have the skills to learn, but that they have the habits of learning, that they don't have just the literacy skills, but that they have the literacy habits. And of course, teachers need to be in the habit of learning and sharing that learning and celebrating their own learning as a part of helping our students come to realize how exciting that can be. You know, if we want our students to become lifelong learners, maybe one of the best ways to do that is to practice that in front of them every single day. So I think the goal is that they are leaving school in the habit of learning, and much of that is personal learning. Much of that is just the skills and the knowledge that you're, and the habits and the passions that you're walking away from the school with.
David, thanks so much for coming on. An hour is just such a short amount of time when the conversation is so good. I'm going to clap for you now, which is hovering. Yeah, I know. I'm so sorry. My very sad internet situation here has meant that I've talked over you a couple of times, and I apologize for that. But it's really been delightful to have you on, and I thank you for coming on the show.
Same here. Thank you very much for the conversation.
Thanks, David. Coming up next week, Alec Koros on social learning and Dick Gale on appreciative inquiry and positive deviance. Thanks to David Warlick for being a patient guest tonight. Thanks to all of you for participating. Sure hope that you have a nice day or an evening, depending on where you are. Take care, everybody. Thanks and bye.